He was reincarnated in another world with hero skills to raise two SSS rank kids. Takumi walks through a forest wondering how he landed in such a strange place when he was living a normal boring life just a second ago. Monsters suddenly surround him, and he realizes that he's in a different world where things aren't so conventional. He checks the stats of the monsters surrounding him and doesn't fancy his chances against them because they are rank C monsters. One of the monsters suddenly lunges at him, but he reacts quickly enough and takes it down with an air shot attack. The other two monsters also lunge at him to get revenge for their fallen comrade, but meet the same fate. Takumi is already tired of this new world because he was welcomed in a hostile way. He decides to take up the drops from the monsters into his inventory. He recalls how he found himself in such an unpleasant situation, remembering when Sil apologized when he arrived. Takumi wondered why he kept apologizing. Sil told Takumi he was a god in the new world and that they were at the corner of the divine realm. Takumi asked Sil for an explanation as to what was happening to him, and Sil told him that he sent him to the Ice Sky world by mistake. Sil explained that Takumi was hit by mistake after he applied excess force while trying to fix something. Takumi keeps moving through the forest, coming to terms with the fact that his life in the previous world ended at the age of 28. Sil informed him that he was reincarnated into Ateldia, which is the world he governs. Sil blessed his new body with basic knowledge of the new world, its languages and other special skills to give him an edge. Takumi pulls up his stats and looks through, realizing that he leveled up to level 3 after taking down the monsters. He suddenly hears a bush rustle and prepares to take down whatever is hiding in the bush, but he's surprised to see a set of fraternal twins. He walks up to them and asks them if they've been separated from their parents, but the children are reluctant to interact with an unfamiliar face. Takumo hears their stomachs growling, so he brings out some food from his inventory, which he hands them. Takumi uses that opportunity to take a lunch break, and they all eat together. He realizes that their clothes are all torn up, so he orders the magical delivery of children's clothes. After the children finish eating, he dresses them up in the new clothes and informs them that he's heading to the nearby town. He asks them if they would like to tag along, but he doesn't get a response. He tries introducing himself and getting the children to introduce themselves in response, but they remain quiet. He decides to use his appraisal skills to get their information, but it only brings up their age. Takumi figures out that the children have no names, so he names the boy Alan and names the girl Alina. He asks them to tag along with him so he can lead them out of the forest, and they follow him. Takumi is glad they have enough strength to walk, and he's considerate enough to move slowly so he doesn't exhaust them. The children suddenly run past him, and Takumi wonders why they're running, but he notices some monsters ahead of them, so he calls out to the children, telling them to return to him. Takumi contemplates using his magic to take down the monsters, but drops the idea because he could hit the kids accidentally. The kids keep running forward, and without breaking stride, they leap into the air and strike down the monsters easily. Takumi is surprised that the kids are so strong, even though they're so young, but he tells them to inform him about monster appearances next time instead of charging off and giving him a scare. Takumi concludes that the kids must be quite powerful to have survived in the forest for so long all on their own. They call Takumi's attention to another monster before they take it down easily, and he commends them for their good work. The kids kept taking down the monsters as they made their way through the forest, and Takumi didn't even have to step in to help them. Takumi notices that it's already dusk, so he asks the kids to gather some wood to make a fire and prepare dinner. The children gather some wood and Takumi makes dinner. As the kids have dinner, Takumi notices they are smiling more unlike before when they were very reserved. After dinner, Takumi sets up a magic tent to keep them safe, and they tuck in for the night. They arrive at the town the next day, and Takumi informs the guards at the gate that he's coming from the forest of Gaia. They are suspicious of him, and Takumi understands their suspicions because the forest is only recommended for rank adventurers. Takumi figures out that he's even more suspicious because he came out of the forest with 2 kids. He makes up a story, telling the guards that he came from the countryside to find some herbs in the forest. He also reassures the guards that the kids are strong enough to defend themselves. The guards ask Takumi if he was able to find the herbs, and he tells them he was, emphasizing how lucky he was to get them without having to go deep into the forest. The guards ask Takumi for his ID before they grant him passage into the town, but he tells them that he doesn't have one because he's coming from the sticks. The guards decide to inspect before letting him in. They ask him to pick up a crystal ball, which Takumi recognizes as a magic tool to check someone's criminal history. They pick up the balls and the guard assesses them, concluding they're clean. He hands them temporary passes and tells them to make official IDs at the guild if they have enough time. They walk into town, and the twins cling so closely to Takumi that he realizes they're scared of strangers. He goes to the town temple where he asks the kids to sit on some benches and wait for him. Takumi proceeds to pray to Sill's statue, and Sill appears, so they begin a conversation. Sill asks Takumi how he's adjusting to the new world, and Takumi informs him of the twins he stumbled upon while navigating the forest. Takumi tells him he'll be leaving them at an orphanage because he can't take care of them. Sill falls for his bait and tries to convince him to keep them, which makes Takumi sure that Sill was behind the whole thing. Takumi figured out that Sill was responsible for sending out monsters while he was in the forest so he could defeat them. He also calls him out for making him stumble upon the kids and take them into his custody. Sill apologizes for using Takumi as a puppet, but Takumi demands an explanation, asking about the kids' identity. Sill tells him that he can't reveal any information about the kids, and Takumi figures out that the other gods are involved with the twins since Sill can't say anything about them. Sill confirms that Takumi is right, and he tells him that the kids aren't ordinary children. He tells Takumi he can't say more than that, so Takumi decides to drop the subject. Takumi asks Sill if the kids can remain in his custody, and Sill gives him full parenting rights. Takumi is disappointed that Sill didn't tell him about the kids sooner, but he tells him that he was never going to take them to an orphanage. He returns to the kids and they head over to an inn so they can sleep on a bed. Takumi checks into the inn and they all hop on the bed in their room without hesitation. Takumi wakes up the next morning to see that the kids are awake. He greets them good morning and they reply, also greeting him good morning. Takumi is so surprised because it's the first time he's heard their voices. He decides to head over to the Adventurers Guild with the kids. They arrive at the guild where they're greeted by Luna, the receptionist. Takumi decides to register himself and the kids as adventurers since there's no registration age limit. Luna hands him a form to fill out and tells him to wait for his ID after filling out the form. Takumi fills out the form and looks around the guild before his ID is ready. He notices that the kids are feeling uneasy around a lot of strangers, but he assures them that they're safe. Luna returns and she presents their guild cards to them. She urges them to take care of their cards because the guild cards also double as their ID cards. Takumi is surprised that he has leveled up from level 3 to level 11 by taking down some monsters. Luna gives Takumi an explanation of the guild system, telling him that the ranks range from F rank, which is the newcomer rank, to S rank, the hero rank. She tells him there's a rank above S rank called the SS rank, but there's no one currently strong enough to hold such a rank. She tells him about parties consisting of different members whose average rank determines the rank of their party. She tells him the procedure for carrying out quests is to submit a quest from the board before proceeding to carry out the quest after the paperwork has been completed. She informs him that any materials or item drops from quests can be appraised and sold at the guild. Takumi decides to register as a party with the kids and Luna asks him for their party name. Takumi thinks for a second and he comes up with White Wings as their party name. Takumi decides they need to go on their first quest as a party, so he goes to the quest board to look at the available quests. He settles for a simple quest of gathering herbs since it's their first quest. Luna approves the quest, telling Takumi has 3 days to complete it. Takumi is so hyped to get his first quest that he rushes to the forest quickly with the kids. They come across a slime and Takumi tells the kids they're in no danger because slimes are harmless. He's glad his first job was located in a peaceful forest. The kids are playing with the slime when Takumi finds the herb of life. He calls the kids over and teaches them how to pick it. The kids run off and they come back almost immediately with their collection of the herb. Takumi is impressed that they could find other similar herbs in such a short time. They gather more herbs together, and they return them to the guild where Luna is rendered speechless by how much of the herb they were able to bring back. She's surprised gathered so much in just half a day. She appraises the herbs and gives them their payment for completing the quest. Takumi commends the kids for making some money, but another adventurer suddenly exclaims, wondering why children are in the guild. Takumi tells the loudmouth that the kids are with him, but the loudmouth tells him the guild is no place for kids. Takumi insists that the kids can stay since they aren't bothering anyone, but the loudmouth tells him that the sight of the twins bothers him. Luna tries to defuse the situation, but the loudmouth grabs Takumi by his collar. The kids are fed up with the loudmouth, so they knock him down. They almost finish him off, but Takumi calls them off. He asks Luna if they'll be punished, but she tells him they won't be because they acted in self-defense. A guard walks into the guild and Takumi recognizes him as the guard they met at the gate when they arrived. Luna calls Takumi's attention to the crying twins and Takumi wonders if they were hurt. The kids beg Takumi not to leave them, and he assures them that he won't be abandoning them. The guard asks Takumi what transpired and Takumi gives him a brief on what happened. Takumi introduces himself as the guard, who in turn introduces himself as Vault, the second captain to a branch of the kingdom's knights. Vault asks why the kids were crying and Takumi tells him they thought he would leave them. He informs them that the kids thought so because he met them in the forest of Gaia and they're surprised that the kids are not his. Luna recalls that slave traders were attacked by monsters in the forest and they figured out that the kids were used as bait so they could get away. Vault appoints Takumi as their guardian using his authority as a knight because they're attached to him. Luna suddenly realizes that Takumi would have items from his time in the forest, and she asks him to sell whatever he has to her. Takumi sells off the items, and he's surprised by how much he makes from it. Vault wanted to speak to the guild master about their usual expedition to the forest of Gaia to take down monsters. They do this to call the monster's number and reduce the risk of monster attacks in their kingdom. He informs Takumi that he would be part of the expedition since he took down monsters in the forest all by himself, but Takumi protests his decision because he's just an F-rank adventurer. Vault goes up to talk to the guild master and he tells Takumi he would make a special request for him to join the expedition. Waving away his protests, he talks to the guild master about the expedition and asks for a special request for Takumi. The guild master is skeptical about adding a newcomer to the expedition, but Vault convinces him that though Takumi is a newbie, he's not a rookie. Takumi has now settled fully into the new world of Ateldia. Alan and Elena, who were previously nervous around strangers, were slowly getting used to meeting new people as well. Their lives as adventurers revolved around working on quests as a party for 2 days and then taking a break on the 3rd day. Takumi takes a bite of his bread, but isn't satisfied because it feels like a vital ingredient is missing. In the new world, there were 3 types of bread: white, rye, and whole grain bread. Though Takumi liked that they were simple, he missed the flavor of the dress-up and dessert bread native to his previous world. Takumi decides to make the loaves of bread himself, and the twins are hyped to taste the bread from his world. Takumi heads over to the Golden Bakery store in the town. He walks into the bakery where he's welcomed by Michelle, who inquires what he wants to buy. Takumi tells her he's not buying anything but wants to ask a favor. Rode, the chief baker and Michelle's father, walks in and Michelle passes Takumi's request to him. Rode asks Takumi what he needs and Takumi asks him to make some bread for him using jam and custard cream. Rode is familiar with jam, but he has never seen custard cream. Takumi asks Rode to add the ingredients to the dough before baking it, which surprises Rode because he's never made anything like that before. Takumi decides to show Rode the ropes and he dons on an apron. He takes a piece of dough and demonstrates how to fill the bread with jam. Rode follows his tutorial and gets how to make a replica of Takumi's dough. Now that Rode understands how to make the bread, he asks for Michelle's assistance so they can also use the custard cream as bread filling. Alan and Elena offer their services to Rode and he gladly accepts it. He tells Takumi he'll be assisting too, so Takumi summons a new ingredient to add to the dough. They work in the bakery all day making the special dough, which they bake to make the special bread. After baling, Rode decides to taste the special bread, and he's surprised by how tasty the bread is. Michelle also takes a bite from the special bread and expresses how sweet it is because of the new ingredients compared to their usual bread. The twins are gobbling down the special bread so fast that Takumi cautions them, telling them to take it easy so they don't choke. Rode is so captivated by the new bread's taste that he asks for Takumi's permission to sell it in the store under his name. He also offers to give Takumi a percentage of their income, but Takumi declines the offer, telling Rode that he's content with having a place to buy his special bread from. Takumi doesn't want to take credit for the idea because that kind of bread was easily available in his old world. Rode is in such high spirits that he decides to experiment with other filling options to see if he can make a special bread of his own. Takumi asks the twins if they enjoyed the new bread. They tell him they enjoyed it and ask for seconds, hoping to get another taste of the delicious bread. The new day, Takumi heads to the Adventurers Guild where he's welcomed by Luna, who informs him that he has been promoted to E rank. Takumi is surprised by this, so he checks his stats, and he's even more surprised to see that he has now leveled up to level 13. Luna commends him for leveling up so fast despite being a newcomer, and she commends the twins for doing their best. Takumi is glad he can now take more jobs since he is an E-rank adventurer. Luna asks him if he would like to visit the labyrinth, which makes him recall, from the knowledge Syl gave him, that there are 108 labyrinths in the Ateldia. Luna informs him of the labyrinth near Shireen, which has 15 underground floors, telling Takumi that most adventurers visit the labyrinth because the town isn't attacked by monsters often. Takumi tells the twins the labyrinth could be their next destination and they are rearing to go. Luna informs Takumi that it takes half a day to reach the labyrinth and several days to clear it. Takumi informs her that he's just visiting the labyrinth to check out a couple of floors to get a feel of the place. Luna wasn't convinced because she felt that Takumi couldn't resist going deep into the labyrinth, but Takumi assured her that he was not strong enough to go too deeply into the labyrinth. They make their way to the labyrinth and they're able to clear the first 2 floors easily. Takumi is surprised that they're already on the 3rd floor after such a short time. He knows it's thanks to the twins' superb sense of direction. They keep moving through the labyrinth as Takumi reads about the labyrinth, noting that it's an earth labyrinth and all the monsters inside are earth type. The ground suddenly rumbles and a mole emerges from the labyrinth floor. Takumi decides to leave the mole to the twins since moles are weak animals and they take the mole down easily. They are surprised when the mole disappears, but Takumi tells them that's what happens in a labyrinth. He points out that items drop in place of the monsters, which can be rare and valuable. The twins search for the drop from the mole and discover a whisker. Takumi is disappointed because the whisker won't be worth much. They keep moving deeper into the labyrinth, and Takumi tells them to take a break to have dinner. He summons his cook stove from his inventory and whips some vegetable soup with the stove. After dinner, Takumi erects his protective magic tent and they go to bed. The next day, they journey deeper into the labyrinth, taking down monsters, taking breaks to get some food, and going to bed at the end of the day. They continued with this loop for several days till they got to the 10th floor of the labyrinth. Takumi opens a secret door and the twins are surprised to see a treasure chest sitting in the room. Takumi is optimistic, thinking that the chest can contain something cool. The twins ask permission to open the chest, but Takumi decides to check if the chest is booby-trapped first. After confirming that the chest is not a trap, he permits the twins to open the chest and they gladly lift the lid. Takumi takes out the stamina and mana potions in the chest, happy to have gotten something valuable from it. A monster suddenly appears at the door, but Takumi is so engrossed in the potions that he doesn't notice this. The twins notice the monster and take it down before it can cause any harm. Takumi commends the twins for saving his hide, and they move over to pick up the hide of the wide ape, which dropped after they defeated it. Takumi is happy because the hide is somewhat valuable. He's in awe of the twins' perception and fighting skills, which have kept him safe so far in the labyrinth. He realizes that their abilities are instinctive, and he's glad they weren't picked up by someone in a position of power who would have used their powers for evil. Takumi now understands why Syl was worried about the kids, but still feels guilty because he feels like he's just using them. The kids draw Takumi's attention to a clay snake approaching them, and he tells them to step back while he takes care of it because the snake is venomous. Takumi decides to test out his throw skill on the snake. He throws a rock at the snake using the spell to weaken it, and then finishes it with a wind cutter spell. Giant bees emerge from within the labyrinth, and the kids volunteer to take the bees down. Takumi warns them to be careful of the bees' stingers as they rush to meet the bees head-on. The kids' physical attacks on the bees are useless because they can't land any of them. They employ Takumi's strategy and try to use their throw skill, but it's useless against the bees. Takumi is surprised that the kids can also use a throw skill, but he's even more surprised that the kids are having trouble taking down the bees. Takumi would have stepped in to take down the bees, but he realizes that the kids have resulted in playing a game of tag with the bees since they're harmless. While the kids are keeping the bees busy, Takumi decides to sort through the item drops they have gotten so far in the labyrinth. He opens his inventory and takes out the ground spider's web, the wild ape fang, and some slime jelly. Takumi wonders how he would put the jelly to use because it's high quality. The kids suddenly corner a bee and they're finally able to take one down. They take down the other bees and then present the drop items to Takumi, who is overjoyed because the bees dropped honey, a precious commodity in Ateldia. He orders the kids to take down any giant bee that crosses their path, and they agree wholeheartedly. Takumi makes some French toast using items from his inventory and some of the honey they got from the giant bees. The kids waste no time digging in, commending how tasty the toasts are. Takumi is also impressed with his cooking skills, but their lunch break is cut short by the appearance of more giant bees. Takumi decides to take care of this batch of giant bees while the kids continue their lunch. He takes down the bees easily using his air shot skill, and they drop more honey. More bees emerge from the labyrinth, and he takes them down with his wind cutter skill. The kids point out that more bees are emerging, and Takumi figures out that the bees are attracted to the scent of honey. The kids offer to take the bees down, getting more honey drops from the bees. Takumi is overjoyed with his new method of bee farming because they would get all the honey they want from it. After gathering honey and other materials while exploring the labyrinth, Takumi and the kids finally arrive at the lowest floor. They come across a huge door, which spans the height of the labyrinth, and Takumi figures out that the door leads to the boss room because of its looks. He breaks the seal on the door and opens it into a huge cave room. Takumi and the kids walk in to look around, but the door immediately closes behind them. The kids get scared because they're trapped in the boss room. A giant earthworm suddenly appears, and Takumi figures out that he can't get out of the room except he takes down the final boss. Takumi tells the kids to stand back while he takes care of things with the boss. Takumi decides to test some skills against the boss and uses his wind cutter skill, but the boss dodges away so quickly that Takumi is surprised by its mobility despite its huge size. The boss suddenly uses throw magic to hurl some sandballs at Takumi, who is surprised that the boss can also use magic. He uses his airshot skill to destroy the sandballs and then shoots several wind arrows which take down the boss. Takumi feels like the fight was too easy and wonders if it's because he's in a low-level labyrinth or Syl overpowered him. Takumi takes the drops from the boss into his inventory, and another door opens in the room. Takumi recognizes the device in the room as a teleportation device that would send them out of the labyrinth. The twins point out a treasure chest, and Takumi opens it up to see that it contains fire bombs which detonate after being imbued with magic. Takumi slots them into the inventory, and they all touch the crystal ball on the teleportation device, which sends them outside. Takumi is so glad to feel the sun's warmth on his face again after so long. Takumi thinks about returning to town, but the twins draw his attention to a wolf. Takumi wonders if the wolf is hostile, but notices its tail wagging, concluding the wolf is peaceful. He appraises the wolf and sees that it's an S-rank Fenrir. He also sees that the wolf is his contracted animal, but doesn't remember getting into a contract with the animal. He figures out that Syl is behind the contract, so he calls the wolf over and tests its loyalty. The kids suggest that Takumi name the wolf, and he names it Jewel. They proceed to the town together, but he stops Jewel at the town border because monsters aren't allowed. He hides Jewel in his shadow so he doesn't scare anyone. Takumi proceeds to the temple where he summons Syl, who is overjoyed to see him after so long. Takumi wants to ask Syl some questions about the contracted beast, but Syl tells him he wasn't the one who sent it. Syl figures out that the head of the god of water's household was the one who sent the contracted beast, and he promises to send Takumi a contracted beast from a nearby grassland. Syl sends more things to Takumi from the water god, telling him it's a way for the god to show appreciation. Takumi knew twins were most likely affiliated with the water god because their skill came from water magic. Syl tells Takumi that the gods promised to send more, but Takumi is reluctant about accepting more gifts. Syl tells Takumi he doesn't get a choice because the other alternative is eternal damnation, and Takumi can't believe Syl is threatening him. After the meeting, Takumi and the twins return to the inn, and they're so exhausted from their labyrinth exploration that they all immediately fall asleep on the bed. The next day, Takumi heads out with the kids to the grassland Syl talked about the previous day, and two monsters suddenly appear, to their surprise. Takumi appraises the beasts to see they are the contracted beast Syl promised him. The tiger is an S-rank monster that controls wind and runs through the air, while the hawk is an A-rank monster that controls lightning and attacks with speed. Takumi names the tiger Feet and the hawk Bolt. The kids are glad to have new company when Takumi remembers that Syl also sent collars for the pets. Takumi the collar on the animals, and he shrinks Jewel and Feet so they can pass off as a normal cat and dog. Alan and Elena ask Takumi to give them collars, but he tells them collars are only meant for animals, which makes them sad. Takumi searches his inventory for something else they can wear to brighten up their mood. He comes across a necklace which he gives them to make them happy. He tells them the pendant has some magic resistance, while the golden ring is equipped to resist physical attacks. He also tells them the silver ring would display their location on a map. He also gives them a magic bag to use as an inventory for their items. They head back to the town, so Takumi hides Bolt in his shadow, while the other animals remain small. The kids present their ID at the gate, and they are allowed inside. Takumi can see that they are excited to have their stuff. They are walking through town when Elena suddenly stops and stares blankly in a random direction. Takumi notices this, and he follows her gaze to see that she's staring at a store's display. Takumi asks Feet and Jewel to hide in his shadow so they can go into the store. They walk into the store and Takumi inquires about the ribbons on display. The store attendant tells him the ribbons can be used as hair decorations. Takumi decides to test it out on Elena. He can't believe how cute she looks with the ribbons on. The attendant gives Elena a mirror, and she likes how she looks with the ribbon on. Takumi decides to buy several ribbons since Elena likes the decoration. They walk through the store, and Elena picks out a black ribbon to the surprise of Takumi, who thought she would go for a pink ribbon. She tells him she wants the black ribbon because it matches his hair. Elena convinces Takumi of her choice, so he gets the ribbon for her. He asks Alan if he would like anything from the store, but Alan declines because he has no use for a ribbon. The attendant asks for Takumi's permission so the kids can try on some clothes for assessment. Takumi gives her permission, and she dresses the kids in several clothes, complimenting how cute they look in each set of clothes. Takumi figures out that she made the clothes herself since she is trying them out on the kids. He notices that the kids like the last batch of clothes the most, so he gets it for them. They return to the inn, and the children go to bed, falling asleep almost immediately. Takumi is still awake as he contemplates getting something for Alan since he got ribbons for Elena. He wonders what kind of things Alan would like because the toys he got when he was younger are non-existent in the new world. He decides to sleep on it before making a decision. Takumi is woken up the next morning by the kids, enthusiastically waiting to get out of bed. Takumi would be going out for his first monster hunting expedition to cull the monsters' numbers and reduce the risk of people being harmed. Takumi dresses up for the day after breakfast, absorbs all his pets into his shadow, and walks out with the kids. Takumi is uncomfortable with Vault's orders that make it mandatory for him to be present for the expedition. He arrives at the point of departure where he meets Sir Vault, who is running the operation and ensuring everything is in order. Vault is glad to see Takumi with the kids. They're exchanging pleasantries when Vice Captain Isaac walks up to introduce himself to Takumi. Isaac apologizes on behalf of Vault because he knows that he forced Takumi to take part in the expedition. He tells Takumi Vault is usually very pushy on such matters, but asks him to play along as best he can. Takumi appreciates Isaac's concern, and he tells him he's glad to be a part of the expedition because he could use the experience. Isaac suddenly notices the kids and wonders if they're also adventurers going on the expedition. Vault tells him not to worry because the children are overpowered. Vault tries interacting with the kids, but they run behind Takumi and Isaac scolds him for frightening them. Takumi explains that the children are shy when around strangers, and he tries to get them to interact with Vault, but they're ice cold. Vault returns to his duties since he can't break through the kids. He tells Takumi he'll be riding in his carriage as they depart for the forest of Gaia in their carriages. Takumi is about to enter the carriage when he suddenly feels like he's being watched by someone hostile. He can't put his finger on it, but notices that the children are also uneasy. He concludes that someone isn't happy. He was invited for the expedition, so he decides to be very careful. Vault notices Takumi's unease and tries to ask him about it, but Takumi tells him everything is fine, doing his best to hide his concern. He walks into Vault's carriage, and they depart. Isaac informs them that their journey to the forest will take over an hour. Takumi asks the kids if they're comfortable, and they tell him they are fine. The other adventurers notice the kids and ask them to give their best during the expedition. The children nod in approval, and Takumi is glad they're slowly getting comfortable around other people. They arrive at the forest, and Vault tells them the expedition will last 5 days. He tells Takumi his plans to split everyone into 3 groups that will traverse the forest and meet in the middle where they will set up camp. He introduces Takumi to the other adventurers joining the knights in their unit. Rudolph, Iris, Gilm, and Zack introduce themselves to Takumi, who, in turn, introduces himself and the kids. Vault informs him that Rudolph is an A-rank adventurer, and Takumi commends him for working hard to achieve such a rank. Vault announces the start of the expedition, and they start walking through the forest. The kids sense monsters hiding in the bushes, and Takumi points it out to Vault. Rudolph can't see any monsters, so he asks Gilm if he can sense anything through his detection magic. Gilm tells him he isn't picking up anything. Takumi isn't surprised Gilm can't detect anything, because his detection magic picks up the magic coming from others by expanding magic from the user. But the twins use perception magic to detect the presence of anything hostile that enters their range. Their perception skill has a wider range than Gilm's detection skill, so it was understandable that he wasn't picking up anything. Gilm suddenly detects something hostile, and he warns the others to stay alert. A red wolf walks out of the forest, and the adventurers prepare to engage it. The kids suddenly run at it and take it down easily to everyone's surprise. Takumi regrets not telling them to keep a low profile during the expedition. The kids happily drag the fallen wolf back to Takumi, but he knows there won't be a drop from the monster. He commends the kids for taking down the wolf, but tells them to take a break from fighting so the adults can handle it. The kids agree with him, but Volt suddenly walks up to him, demanding an explanation for what just happened. Volt wonders how the kids could take down a C-rank monster, and Takumi reminds him that the kids already took down a C-rank adventurer too. Volt thought the adventurer put down his guard, so the children took advantage of that. He didn't think the kids were that strong. Takumi also reminds him about the circumstances in which he found the children, recounting how he took them in after discovering them in that same forest. They can't believe children survived in the forest on their own. Takumi tells them the kids are overpowered because they survived in the forest for several days. Meanwhile, Syl is watching Takumi with the kids in the forest of Gaia, hoping they survive the expedition unscathed. The expedition party continues moving through the forest. The children suddenly run off and Takumi goes after them. They find a spirit grass herb and hand it to Takumi, who recalls a quest where they were asked to pick the herb to be used as an ingredient in magic medicine. He's impressed the kids remember the usefulness of the herb, and he commends them for picking it. Takumi tells them they can't wander off too far from the group, and they're sad that they don't get to play. They use their cute baby eyes to blackmail Volt emotionally, asking permission to wander as they want. Volt loses his resolve and permits them to wander off as long as they don't stray too far away from the group. The kids happily wander off again and find some rock moss, which they point out to Takumi. Volt wonders what the moss does, and Takumi explains that it's used in medicines to relieve itching, recalling Volt's complaints about the absence of a medicine for itching. Volt is overjoyed to hear this, so he tells Takumi to gather as much as he can manage. He rushes off to another rock to pick some moss, but Isaac stops him, telling him not to uproot the moss carelessly because it can cause a rash. He then scolds Volt for acting so carelessly, telling him the children asked Takumi to pick the moss instead of doing it themselves for a reason. Takumi picks up the moss while Isaac continues lecturing Volt because of his bad decisions. Takumi decides to use the kids as the ultimate weapon of peace and sends them over to Isaac bearing gifts of moss. Isaac is flattered that they gave him all the moss they picked, and he accepts it gladly. 6 orcs and 1 high orc suddenly come into view, approaching them menacingly. Rudolph tells Volt he will take care of the high orc with the other adventurers, while Takumi decides to take on one of the normal orcs. Volt doesn't think he would be able to handle it on his own, but he reassures him that he would be fine. He rushes at the orc and attacks it with his wind cutter magic, which takes it out. The other knights and adventurers team up to take down the other orcs and successfully clear the orc horde. Volt suddenly approaches Takumi and grabs him, questioning him about his powers since he took down an orc on his own. The twins are furious with the way Volt approached Takumi, and they almost lash out at him, so he releases Takumi. He categorizes Takumi as a fraud since he's an F-rank adventurer when he's stronger than that. Takumi tells him he's now an E-rank adventurer, but Volt tells him his rank doesn't match his abilities. Volt tells Rudolph to remind him to ask the guild master to raise Takumi's rank when they get back to town. Rudolph explains that an adventurer's rank can be raised by the guild master if recommended by a high-ranking adventurer, which surprises Takumi. Isaac notes that their current expedition is unusual because, though they are just at the forest's perimeter, they have encountered more monsters than they typically do. They consider investigating the forest, but the kids ask Takumi for snacks, so they all take a lunch break. Takumi makes the special bread for the kids, and Volt immediately recognizes it because it's rarely available in the bakery. He asks Takumi how he got it, and Takumi tells him that he had the bakers make it for him. Volt approaches the kids, asking them for a share of their food, but they decline. Takumi tells him not to take food from the kids, but he notices that everyone else is staring hungrily at the special bread. He decides to hand out the special bread as a one-time thing since he has enough in his inventory. Everyone happily takes a piece of bread and munch, so happily that Takumi is worried that they're now oblivious to their environment. They finish their lunch and get back to their investigation with renewed resolve. They are walking through the forest when they suddenly spot a red flare in the sky, so they decide to rush over to the location and help whoever called out for help. Vault tells everyone to reserve some strength because they may run into a fight, but Takumi tells him he would go ahead since the unit could be in dire need of help. Takumi uses his wind magic to accelerate himself, paying no attention to Vault, who tries to talk him out of it. Takumi arrives at the scene to see a unit surrounded by bloody wolves, advanced forms of the red wolves. Takumi notices that some members of the unit are hurt, so he decides to approach the fight cautiously. He summons his water katana and asks the kids for assistance to down the wolves. Vault arrives with the other adventurers, and he's surprised that Takumi and the kids took down the wolves. He suddenly gets a hostile feeling that they're being watched, as a stranger stares at them from within the forest, the same feeling he felt earlier that day. Takumi had to step in and give the knights a few lessons on food making because the food they made after their monster hunting session was taboo to the palate. Vault explained that it was understandable they couldn't cook since they were knights, so Takumi suggests Miss Iris whips something up. One of the adventurers immediately turns down his offer because Iris makes a mean stew, but not in a good way. Takumi was surprised that no one could make a decent meal. He wants only the best meals for the kids, so he decides to step in and get things done himself. He informs the knights about his decision, and he dons on an apron. He guides the other knights on the proper ingredients and proportions for the meal. After an intense period, they finally make a suitable meal, which everyone gladly accepts because it smelt glorious. They all dig into their dinner without hesitation, commending Takumi for a well-done job. They clear out the pot, which makes Takumi proud to satisfy them to such an extent. They sleep with full bellies, and they wake up the next morning, expectant of another cooking masterclass for Takumi, which he takes as the wages for preparing such a good meal the previous night. Takumi reluctantly resigns himself to his fate when he suddenly feels someone is spying on him with evil intent. He looks towards the direction of the gaze, but he doesn't see anyone. He goes over to console the kids because he knows they would be scared after the evil gaze. They continue on the expedition, and Vault confirms that there is something unusual about the forest. Rudolph confirms it because their encounter with monsters is at an all-time low. Takumi asks the duo what they are talking about when Tierra, the third captain, suddenly turns around to thank him for coming to his rescue the previous day. Takumi is sad that they are parting ways, but the captain tells him he can't lay idle around after his encounter the previous day. Vault expresses how unusual it is for monsters to attack in groups. Tierra also expresses concern because they haven't seen any more monsters despite advancing deeper into the forest, contrary to what usually happens. Though Takumi is concerned with the topic of discussion, he is constantly distracted by the evil gaze that he keeps getting occasionally. He looks around, trying to find the origin of the gaze when the kids suddenly exclaim. Takumi looks towards the direction they are gazing and notices a huge snake casually staring at him. Takumi kicks himself for detecting the monster late because he is distracted by the occasional evil gaze. He points out the monster to everyone, and they are surprised that an evil viper is attacking them. Vault tells the expedition party to retreat as the monster suddenly drops from the tree and attacks them. It crushes the adventurers with its strong body and takes down some knights with its tail. The kids want to engage the monster in battle, but Takumi holds them back so they don't hurt themselves. The snake lunges at them, and Takumi casts his wind cutter spell, but the monster dodges it easily, to his surprise. Tierra casts a high-level earth spell to immobilize the monster temporarily. Rudolph realizes that it would be difficult to defeat the monster because of how powerful it is. They figured out that the monster was the cause of the forest's abnormality. Rudolph orders the wounded to retreat because they would get in the way of the battle. Vault puts Isak in charge of the wounded, while Takumi tells the kids to back off because the monster is too dangerous. Rudolph asks Iris, Gilm, and Zack to back him up so they can combine forces to take down the monster. They try to attack the monster, but their attack doesn't even leave a scratch because the snake's scale is too thick. Takumi recalled that the monster's scale was resistant to physical and magic attacks. The monster attacks again with its tail, and they all get out of the way so they don't get hit because they know it would be fatal. While the wounded are being tended to, the snake turns its attention to finish the job, but Takumi blocks its path with his wind cutter spell, which falls some trees. Vault tries combining fire with his sword strike to take down the monster, but it's ineffective against it. Iris and Zack attack the snakes with their magic spells, but it does 0 damage. Takumi tries to recall the snake's weakness, but the snake doesn't give him enough time to think. Takumi notices the kids hanging from the snake's body as it attacks, and he warns them that the snake could be dangerous. The snake turns its attention to the kids, and Takumi uses that opportunity while the snake is distracted to summon a dagger from his inventory. He throws the dagger at the snake, and it embeds itself in the snake's eye, hurting it. Vault commends Takumi for hurting the snake, but Takumi suddenly feels the unsettling gaze on his back again. The kids are distracted by the gaze, and the snake utilizes the opportunity to knock them down with its tail. Takumi is worried about the kids' safety, but can't turn his attention away from the snake, or it would hurt the kids. Iris runs over to the kids to heal them, so Rudolph assures him the kids are alright since they're already back on their feet. Takumi asks Rudolph to buy him some time because he wants to cast an advanced wind spell which surprises Rudolph. After all, he has never seen Takumi cast such a spell. Takumi tells Rudolph to order everyone to retreat behind him when he gives the signal so no one gets hurt. The adventurers keep the snake occupied while Takumi builds up his magic spell. He gives Rudolph the signal and Rudolph orders everyone to retreat. Takumi says the incantation for the spell and he casts it at the snake, completely chopping it into bits. Several trees suddenly fall from the impact of Takumi's spell, which makes the expedition party scramble for safety. Takumi realizes he put too much magic into his spell. Rudolph is dumbfounded by Takumi's magic power, but he praises him for saving them from the Viper. He advises Takumi to gather as many materials from the Viper as he can manage because they are useful. The kids suddenly come running, commending Takumi for being so strong. Takumi is worried about them, so he asks them about their wounds. They reassure him that they are fine and their wounds are all healed. Takumi is glad to hear this and thanks Iris for healing the kids. Iris informs him that the kids only came down with scratches, which surprised her because she expected their injuries to be severe. Takumi figures out that the kids aren't normal because their bodies are too sturdy. He knew a normal kid would have come down with more than just a few scratches from the Viper attack. He hopes the kids aren't exposed to such danger in the future when he suddenly feels the evil gaze on his back. He walks towards the direction, ignoring Vault's praises, and knocks down a knight, to the surprise of everyone. He holds his sword to the knight's throat, threatening him not to move a muscle, and Vault approaches him, wondering why he's threatening the knight. Takumi tells him to question Sages, the knight, and Vault asks Sages if he did anything wrong. Sages denies any wrongdoing, but Takumi sums up his defense as lies. Takumi is surprised. He didn't dare to speak up after harboring such an evil intent against him. Rudolph backs up Takumi's claims after noticing that Sages stared at him with evil intent since they grouped up. He knew Takumi was tired of his antics because his gaze distracted the kids, resulting in injuries. Vault wonders why Sages had such an evil intent against Takumi, but Sages claims that Takumi is telling lies against him. Takumi is fed up with Sages' display and asks him to tell the truth because Rudolph already backed up his claims. Sages tells Takumi he is to blame for his misfortune because he caught Vault's attention. Takumi tries to understand what Sages is implying, and Isaac explains that Sages has strong affections towards the captain. Takumi now understands that Sages was glaring at him because he got too close to the captain and thought he would come in the way of their relationship. Vault denies any relationship with Sages, who tries to get him committed, but Vault shuts down his advances. Takumi teases Vault for being the cause of his problems, but Vault tells him he had no hand in it. Isaac sincerely apologizes to him for being caught up in the knight's affairs due to their lack of supervision. He assures Takumi that the offender would be duly punished, and Takumi takes his words for it. Vault expresses concern for the kids because they were injured, but they assure him that they're all healed up. Takumi tells Vault he should be apportioned some blame because he overlooked the evil intent. He warns Sages that he won't forgive him in the future if such an occurrence recurs. Isaac thanks him for his consideration. Rudolph suddenly walks up to him, glad that the discussion is over. He informs Takumi that he is starving after expending so much energy taking down the Viper. Everyone at the party echoes Rudolph's complaint, begging Takumi to make something for them. Takumi isn't feeling up for it because one of the knights caused the kids harm, but he changes his mind when the kids insist that they want to have dinner with the rest of the expedition party. Takumi agrees to make the meal and asks for assistance from the members of the expedition party. The kids offer to help with the meal, but they make a mistake and they lose all motivation. Takumi assures them that they will get better with more practice, and they cheer up when they realize that Iris isn't much better at helping Takumi. After dinner, Takumi looks at his stats and realizes he has leveled up considerably. He notices he has a new summon category and can now cast water magic. He decides to try out water magic in the future whenever he has the chance. Vault approaches him to apologize for the day's event, and the kids offer him a seat. Vault gladly takes the seat and informs Takumi he's ending their expedition. Takumi and the kids are surprised by this, but Vault explains that it would be dangerous to proceed because they have a lot of wounded members. He informs Takumi they will be leaving the forest the next morning, which will complete his quest. He reminds Takumi to take his reward from the guild when they return, and the kids are glad that the expedition ended, expressing how much fun they had. Vault promises to ask them for the next expedition, but Takumi isn't enthusiastic about it because he wants a break. Takumi returns to the guild the next day where he's greeted by Luna, who has been enthusiastically waiting for him. She leads him to a room where the guild master is waiting for him. The guild master introduces himself as Johan, and Takumi introduces himself and the kids to Johan. Johan tells him about information from Rudolph and Vault concerning his rank, but Johan isn't convinced because Takumi doesn't look strong in his eyes. But because he was recommended by two high-ranking people, the guild master considers promoting him to an A-rank adventurer. Luna is hyped that Takumi would be promoted to such a high rank in such a short time, but Johan calms her down. He explains that Takumi's feats earned his rank and apologizes for not granting him his rank, but Takumi tells him he's more than satisfied to be an A-rank adventurer. Johan asks Takumi what he would do about the kids because their low rank will influence their party rank, hindering him from taking higher quests. He also states that ranking up the kids will draw some ill wills from people. Takumi asks the kids' opinions, and he decides to raise their rank by 1 level. Johan is satisfied with this because their party will become C rank, allowing Takumi to take B rank quests. He asks Luna to take care of the paperwork, and the kids present their IDs to her at the receptionist's desk. She appraises their IDs and is surprised they explored the labyrinth to the last floor in only a few days. She informs Takumi that he just broke a record, but Takumi asks her to keep it a secret because he wants to avoid endangering the kids by drawing attention to them. Luna decides to oblige to his request, though she doesn't think anyone will be unreasonable enough to fight the person who took down a viper. She finishes the rank-up process and presents them with their new IDs and expedition proceeds. Takumi is about to leave the guild and head home, but Luna stops him short, asking for the materials he collected from the expedition. Rudolph already told her that they had taken down a red wolf and an evil viper, so she was looking forward to obtaining the materials from Takumi. Takumi tells her he can't sell the materials to her in the guild, so she leads him to a secure warehouse. Takumi decides to keep 1/3 of the materials from the expedition and sell off the rest. He also empties his inventory from his labyrinth exploration, and Luna gladly buys everything from him. They leave the guild with Takumi being so exhausted that he falls asleep immediately after they arrive at their lodge. Watch this next video. See you on the next one.